Good morning. My name is Caroline Worthington. I'm Director of the Royal Society of Sculptors, and welcome to Dora House, our home. It's so lovely to see everybody out on a Sunday morning, so keen to hear about art. Thank you for joining us. Yesterday we opened our new exhibition, Assembly, Abraham, Cruzvillegas and Celeste. You'll have walked through Abraham's amazing installation next door, and we're sitting among Celeste's site-specific work in our studio. So enjoy some time looking around after the event this morning. In the meantime, it is my great pleasure to introduce Abraham Cruzvillegas, who is with us from Mexico City, and Mark Godfrey, curator and New Contemporaries.
New director of New Curators.
Thank you.
Many of them are here.
Yeah, which is great. And I'm not going to say much more because the two of them are going to be in conversation about Abraham's work and their great friendship, fresh from Arsenal winning yesterday at Highbury. So without further ado, Abraham and Mark, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, yes, thank you very much for the invitation for us to be here, and it's great to see you back in London. We're going to just have a kind of free-flowing conversation about various aspects of your work, and then there'll be time for questions. I want to start by talking just about the work that you've all passed through and passed by, which is in the front room there, which came out of one of the projects that we did together. It came out of an exhibition in Naples at Thomas Dane's gallery there. And one of the ideas for this work was to bring you to Naples with nothing and for you to gather materials that were presented to you. Either you'd walk and find them, or you'd ask people at the gallery to bring in things that they were about to throw out. And then you made a sculpture. I was just people have now seen the sculpture. Almost all of it was made without touching or modifying the materials, but there are some elements which were modified, which we'll come to. But can you just tell us about this approach, what it means for you to make a large work with things that you find on site?
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, everybody, for coming on Sunday, as you said. No, first of all, maybe I will just try to give a little frame context for all of you who, of course, know nothing about my practice. And it's important to say that, first of all, I started working this way, dealing with found objects or things that were around me. Normally, I don't look for objects. I used to say that they find me. And this is not a joke. It maybe goes in a more spiritual way, the way of animism. So things have a will, and objects have wishes and desire. That once I said this, they find me. And I started some long time ago. I would say my artistic vocabulary has been growing and diversifying itself in the long term. Now it's more than 30 years that I've been working as an artist, or professionally at least. And because I think I was an artist since I was a child, since we all were children. And so I've made a film, I made a theater project, I make drawings almost every day. Sometimes I painted, and I write. It's part of my everyday practice, writing. I also write lyrics for songs. I cook sometimes. But the most important element of my practice is dealing with objects, found objects. And the first thing was maybe working with things that were at home at my parents' house, because my father was an artist. He made paintings and sculptures, like carving wood properly, like the real art, not what I do. And carving wood and painting with oil on pieces of wood with golden leaf. So it was what we call now commercial painting or commercial art. And then he stopped at a certain point in making this, and many of these objects stayed at home as forgotten things. And then, ¿Cómo estás, Lee? And then this is I'm his godfather. Oh. And then No, what I'm trying to say is that these commodities that my father produced at certain point just stay there like a stock of things forgotten at home, and then I had some kind of epiphany, not in a religious way again, but more spiritual. That is that I thought these are things that belong to me because they are here with me and we are together. And then I started using, or let's say reusing, his forgotten art objects. That was the very beginning. But before that, I was a cartoon artist. I was a caricaturist and making comic strips. So it's been like that, the long term, let's say, the context. But this is what I've been doing forever, let's say, putting things together. I think many times in the ikebana, Japanese art, of arranging flowers together. So it's things that existed previously, but the artist does some kind of new arrangement in reality. And they tell things together, to each other and to us. This is the way I work. I mean, it would be arrogant to say I'm an ikebana artist. I'm not. But I think a lot on that when I do my things. So I try, as Mark said, maybe almost not to modify at all the objects, but just putting them together in a new order. And these say new things, again, among them and to me and to us. And then I share it. I make it public. I make exhibitions. And recently, some years ago, I was invited to South London Gallery to be part of a group show by Andrew Renton, curator Andrew Renton, who's a good friend. And it was a show that gravitated around Kylie Minogue's song, what's the famous one? La, la, la.
Can't Get You Out of My Head.
That one. And then...
Can't Get You Out of My Head.
Right, exactly. It was a beautiful show, and I proposed an instruction manual for children from Camberwell and South London to look for materials for me instead. And that was a big change in my vocabulary again, trying to produce something in which I almost did nothing. And it's not that I'm lazy. I love working, but it was more about like trying to challenge the possibility of not choosing, and then when getting the material, not excluding, and not excluding is political, right? So this is very important. And then since then I've been trying to do so. The instruction manual says something like, this was given again to children from a primary school in Camberwell. It says, find something useful, does not matter what for, but useful, without value, free of emotions, natural or industrially produced, new or used, big or your hand size, your body's proportions, not larger, not ugly, not nice, just an object. To construct, classify, improvise, transform, adapt, customize, defend, release. Let it suspended definitely, indefinitely. So that's the instruction. Then I came to the school with the children, and they brought from home little things like their jewels. And seriously, this makes me very emotional because it was impressive, the selection of things. They brought a little piece of bubble wrap. And I said, why did you bring it? And the kid just said. The other one brought the fried chicken tray, empty. And he said, why it's so important? He said, don't you understand? A little very, 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 very worn piece of soap, like thin, transparent, the sole of a shoe. And they said, why is it so important for you? Because it stops the door. Huh. And et cetera, all the et cetera you can imagine. And I just hung them from a structure, a wooden structure that was hanging from the ceiling at the South Lawn Gallery. That was kind of a model replicating the shape of my parents' house. And with little strings, hemp strings, the objects hung. Period. So that's the way also I asked the people in Napoli, in the gallery, Thomas Dane in Naples, to look for materials for me. I gave them exactly the same instruction manual. But this is people from the gallery. and they gave me this material. And I went to Naples from Mexico, or from Paris maybe, I don't remember.
Mexico.
Then Mexico. And I made this similar arrangement, and we had the panels, this kind of Japanese restaurant panels, that I found really beautiful. I asked them, give me something that is not nice, but they gave me these nice things, and I said, I will use it, I will not refuse it. And then we just added some colored glass that was also in stock in a store nearby the gallery. And of course, it came here to London, and it changed a lot because the space is different, but the materials are the same. So it reminds a lot the work from Naples, but it's completely different. And here we were constructing it, and I was making a new work that is here in the corridor. And I used, instead of washers, I used bottle caps, beer bottle caps for drilling, for screwing. And then we made a lot of them. And then I just dropped those that I didn't use, the bottle caps, in the work like a confetti, like a celebration of time and beer drinking, of course. But more than that, like the very fact of being together, celebrating in a conviviality that is perhaps mute or silent, but it's there.
So, I mean, that's an amazing and full answer to my question. You know, there are some really interesting things to draw out about no hierarchy, you know, the idea of not excluding anything, and giving use. And also kind of the things that are in this sculpture come from someone else's choice, not your personal choice, not because of this idea of a found object finding you, which is a surrealist idea about sort of the charge of the object. But a few other things to draw out. When you work like this, when you ask other people to gather objects together, you then have to make decisions about structure or no structure. And in this work, there is a clear structure, and the structure is one of right angles. And the structure relates also to the grids in the doors, which are more present perhaps because of the colour in those in the coloured glass. And because you're so well versed in the histories of abstraction in 20th century art, you know, I would look at this and think, well, here you're interested in thinking about the relation of this practice of gathering materials that have deemed to be like waste that would normally find their way into landfill, but you're also interested in in what it means to cross that with the traditions of Mondrian and the grids. Is that part of the thinking? Why the right angles for this work?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a beautiful question because it's political. I think, of course, in the history of abstraction as something that belonged to us in art, and we've been using it in like a conventional way, maybe more or conventionalized, if you want, since abstraction appeared early then during the Russian Revolution, maybe. You know, when we spoke about this, when we made the project for the Tate, like the triangles and the Malevich and the Bolshevik and all this, that is not only because of that is political, but it is also because of that. And of course, I'm not a fan. I would say I'm not a fan of nothing, but I'm very much interested in Mondrian's work. And I think there is two elements there. One is economical, the other one is religious. The way he used angles for the representation of reality, for not anymore representing nothing, but getting lost or trying to get lost the abstract, the representation or the figuration, if you want. And then I had this very, I don't know how to describe it, but this idea of like an anecdotic thing from Mondrian, walking in his studio only in right angles, not making any curve, and I'm trying to behave that way in reality, and like again politically, what it means, and religiously, and it went really strong for me. And I tried since why to make things in similar ways as a kind of again like an instruction manual for myself. But then of course it's performing the artist, performing the idea of something that I perceive as making art. Maybe Bruce Nauman could be another one that related to this, right? In the studio, alone, not performing with an audience. That's something that I started gathering from here and there, but it happened, and you know this, that once in life, I discovered a beautiful artist from Brazil. His name is Helio Oiticica. And it broke all my perceptions and concepts from geometry and from modern language, or modern art language, if you want. And it became pure festivity, pure party, pure joy, pure pleasure, pure desire, breaking everything, breaking abstraction. But it's, of course, it's again political. He worked in the favela. He worked in the place where people are recovering and recycling objects, not because of an aesthetic approach. At the end, it's aesthetic, of course. But at the very beginning, it's only economical. And then he produced, after a very sophisticated process of transformation of abstraction, this beautiful art that is to be worn, the parangole. There are clothes made out of garbage, or what people perceive as garbage, but it's not, it's material. So it became my policy as well. And not only Oiticica, but there are many, Arthur Barrio, Lygia Clark, Lygia Pape, from Brazil only, but also from Cuba, from Argentina, from many places in the world. And it's not so coincidental that it's mostly people from the South, right? And this is maybe not religious, it's not about religion, but it's political, and it's economical, and this is history. And so that will be maybe my approach. And in this I try to, also, maybe just this is formal, if you want, but it happens that this is a house, this is not a white cube. It has many, many details that tell it's a house. There is the fireplace, there's the windows, all this, the LED work in the window, etc. But there is also the floor. And floor, in general, in houses, it has a pattern. And here it's very, very, very specific and very strong. So instead of fighting with these details of the house, I try to approach them as part of the work. Of course, once the work or the exhibition finishes, the work will be dismantled and it will take a new shape next time. But here it has the shape it has to have because of this grid and pattern that we have already in the house. It's very beautiful, by the way. So I try to create again these angles and then to break it, to break my own rule, let's say.
Thank you once again. So you mentioned Helio Oiticica, and one of the slight kind of insider quotations I think that you sometimes place in your work that shows your interest in Oiticica is pink and green. And in this work over here, just these two like cleaning cloths that you found on the floor. Like most people would look at them just as cleaning cloths. People who know you well and your Instagram and your love of Oiticica's love of Mangueira, the samba school, the favela in Rio, will recognize the pink and green from that. But next to the pink and green is a cobblestone, and the cobblestone is there from the streets of Naples, but also speaks to a kind of history of revolution, tearing up the cobblestones. And can you say a little bit about, first of all, the cobblestone is the most weighty part of this work, and then another part of the work which you see here, which is the very thin strand of material that connects to the ceiling, and you also have that here. So what's the cobblestone about for you, and what's the strand of material and the connection to the ceiling rows?
Yes, well, first, it was some years ago, maybe some 22 years ago, that I went for the first time to Rio to visit my friend Damian Ortega, who used to live there. And I told him, why don't we do a little pilgrimage to Mangueira, the samba school where Helio Oiticica used to go dancing. And we did. So suddenly, when being there in the school, in the samba school that we've been recently in Rio with Mark in another school. But anyways, because in Mangueira there were no activities. But then that time in 2002, I think, it was the celebration for the election of the Queen Bee for the Carnival, which is a big thing. It was Milton Nascimento presiding the honor table there. It was like, everybody were crying and so. But suddenly, looking around outside the house of the school, I started discovering myself in a different way because the neighborhood is exactly like mine in Mexico City, but exactly. And then I said, I made all this travel and this pilgrimage to come home. So I made the colors of the flag of Mangueira mine, which are pink and green. So when I arrived there in Naples and they gave me these cleaning clothes that are pink and green, I said, oh, these people know me. And then it happened that after that trip to Brazil, I started using these colors for my work different ways. It's not a homage. It's not like it's more, maybe something more personal, like because it's about my own experience, not my biography. I mean, it would be very rare, very strange if someone sees anything biographical in the work, right? It's just abstract, if you want. But anyways, I've been using this combination. It's that in color theory, it's called complementary contrast, like blue and yellow, or purple and blue, etc. So this is one thing about the colors and about like the story itself of the pink and green. But also, they gave me in Naples this cobblestone that it leads to the title of the work. It's called Autorritrato Pedonale con San Pietrino. It means pedestrian self-portrait with cobblestone. They call it there in Italy the cobblestone San Piedrino. I don't know why. But it's like St. Peter. It refers to St. Peter, so again, religion. And then they call it also Katzimbocchio, okay, which is a very local dialect term that comes from German at the same time. It's like a Katzenkopf. So it's kind of a phonetic translation to a sound that loses this meaning, so it goes abstracted as well. But I was born in 1968 in Mexico City, and this is important, not again because of my biography, but for political reasons. In 1968, there was a big uprising by students who went protesting against the authoritarian government that we still have now, 56 years after. And they went protesting and being repressed by the police, and many were killed. The night of October the 2nd, 1968, many students were taken, kidnapped to jail, tortured, and many murdered. The year I was born. So this is very important for me. What was the only weapon they had against police or the army? Cobblestones. Right? Like in Paris, same year. Like in Prague, the same year. Like in every new demonstration, every year. What they do? Cobblestones. So this is the heart of the work, of course. And it's silent, but it tells a lot.
And the cord?
Oh, that was for cleaning.
But what's this interest in connecting the work, to the architecture, and also this very flighty idea of it's very light.
We had these all the pieces of glass to be cleaned, and of course we cut them to adjust to the size of the panel spaces. And then we were cleaning that, and I saw this large piece of cloth, maybe something like this, that's this big. So we made like little pieces to clean with water, and then I made little stripes to connect with the ceiling. So the idea of this is that making this, I can use rope or I can use whatever is at hand, but the idea is to have always the work connecting both ceiling and floor. So using the space accordingly. But also every new time it's exhibited in a new space, it adjusts to the height. So we have an extra stock of this cloth just in case. And also I use, to hold it on a piece of copper pipe that is there, I use one of my earrings as a holding ring.
Thank you. I just want to ask one more question about this, which is about another word in the title about self-portrait. And it's this idea of autorritrato, self-portrait, comes into many of your works. And traditionally, people think about an artist's self-portrait as something that will tell them about the personal angst or experience or expression, traumas, hopes, pride of the artist. And you use that genre of the self-portrait in a completely different way. And you've been interested in giving this title to a work that no one apart from you would recognise as a self-portrait, but it's a provocation to ask what that might mean. So where did you first begin to think about your work in terms of self-portraiture? And what kind of ideas of instability or other ideas come into your concept of making a self-portrait?
Yes, well, I've been approaching this idea of the self-portrait in different ways. I mean, as I said, I make drawings almost every day. Since I was a child, I've been making images of apes, like primates. All of them are self-portraits, of course. And this comes from the use of thumb that we all have. We are primate. I mean, that's why I'm saying that it's self-portraits. And of course, it took me to understand many things about like our nature, violent as we are, destructive, aggressive, but also caring and loving and passionate. And this is animal, this is natural. And we migrate and we kill each other, we embrace each other, we hug each other. And this is what I tried, as you described, my desire, my pride, it's there. But of course, in nature, there are many contradictory things that are not ethical or moral. And that's also something I accept myself, that I can be contradictory, I can be unstable, I can be precarious. My work should be the same then, everything. And I try to procure, to make this very, very visible, very evident, that it's contradictory, unstable, precarious, stupid, inefficient, ugly, what else? Fatty. I don't know. So that's it. And then I try to produce a mirroring, let's say, kind of dynamic in which this sculpture here should equal the drawing of the ape, right? So they are the same for me. There is no difference. And of course, I try to use the concept of the self-portrait in a political way as well, no? Because it's not about the image of the artist. Maybe yesterday I was telling someone, maybe it was you, Mark, that I made a little performance that I think it's also a self-portrait, reading lyrics that I write for songs. And I try to think on the image of the artist as something that should be unstable, not stiff, not like a statue standing on a plinth, the way maybe Gilbert and George did, right? And I mean, I have so many references that I can tell you that I also like to have in my work. We were talking about, like, in the performance, many references to disco music, punk music, ranchero music, salsa, cumbia, calypso, ska, that I love. I listen to music every day. And for instance, I cannot write without music. It's a manic. I'm very neurotic. But all these references should be present in the work, you know? And I try to make this evident, very evident, but also in the sculptural work. So you can see in my work, Helio Itzica, Lucas Samaras, Yoko Ono, all my references are there. And I think they should be transparent. Sometimes they say, oh, yeah, it looks like a bit like whatever, I don't know. And I say, of course, yeah, definitely, yes, it does. Because it's the way I want. And this is then a self-portrait of art, language, and art history, right? So it's not about me. It's about the way we appropriate language and transform it into maybe sometimes shit. The way of the cannibalism of the tropicalist from Brazil.
I want to ask now a few questions that aren't about this sculpture, but about other aspects of your thinking and your activities. And one of them is to do with a big project that you worked on between the first time you showed this and now, which is as a curator of the part of the Indigenous Histories show that was at MASP in Brazil, in Sao Paulo last year. And you were invited by Adriana Pedrosa, who's the curator of this year's Venice Biennial, to do a section of that. And you've participated in different curatorial projects also around indigeneity. And I think from my point of view, it's been interesting to watch because we worked together maybe 10 years ago, did the project at the Tate Modern. And at the time, when this project was announced, it was just, this is the project by Abraham Cruzvillegas. And I felt in recent years that had it been happening this year, there would have been a big fanfare about Abraham Cruzvillegas, the first indigenous artist to have a show in the Turbine Hall. Because there's recently such an emphasis on questions of indigeneity and curatorial life. It's something within your interests and your background, but you don't maybe approach it in the way that others do. So can you say something about that and that project in Brazil?
I'm trying to calculate how to answer because it should be a very long answer.
Yeah, sorry.
No. I'm thinking more on our friends. No, I think there are many things in your question because, first of all, yes, I organized, I never say as a curator, but yes, I curated some exhibitions here and there in little galleries in Mexico, but also my gallery here in London. I made a show some years ago that was related to punk. So I asked friends of mine from the gallery and some from other places, artists, I mean, to give me punk ideas. Not ideas about punk, but punk ideas for making art, and then I would make the work for them. And then the idea was, you give me one idea, you give me one idea, and then I put them together and they destroy each other. So I did. And then one example was, I asked Michael Landy to give me a punk idea, and he said, go take a pee on Malcolm McLaren's grave. And Rodney McMillian, maybe you know Rodney from Los Angeles, a beautiful, fantastic artist. Rodney said, go make some social work in a very poor neighborhood in London. So what I did was, I went to pee in a very poor neighborhood in London. So, and I documented it, of course. The gallery people documented it for me. Then there was a picture of that performance in the exhibition. So like that, we had like some 30, 40 ideas that crush each other. And like that, I like playing with this. Again, the performance of the artist, the performance of the curator, the performance of the et cetera, all the et ceteras. And like that, I made some 6, 7 exhibitions. But for Brazil, I was invited by Adriano Pedrosa, the artistic director of the Museum of Art of Sao Paulo, to be part of the curatorial team for an exhibition that's called Historias Indígenas, Indigenous Stories, that was part of a series of exhibitions called Histories. So there was histories of women, histories of children, histories of dance, histories of, and now they are opening soon, queer histories. But they also did indigenous histories. And I was part of the curatorial doing the section of Mexico, or what we call Mexico now, better said, right? So I was asked to make a selection of works from artists and works from that region. And there was another person making Peru, Brazil, of course, that were a group of 3 Amazonic curators from Canada, from New Zealand, Australia, and Denmark. Denmark is the Sami people. But it, of course, led to 3 different seminars they organized there, along with many other thinkers, philosophers, historians, anthropologists, and so that been discussing for many years the concept indigenous. That is, of course, very unstable, contradictory, stupid, inefficient, and economical and political, and so. And then it took me to a big learning and lots of discussions and meetings with people who know about this and reading. So it was all about education for me, pedagogy, like learning, me, not teaching, but learning. That's my goal in general for any new project I do, as we did in the Tate, right? And then my goal was to present all these contradictory perceptions of the indigenous in the long term, including colonial time and pre-Columbian time in Mexico. So we had an Aztec codex, the copy of an Aztec codex that is now, the original one is in Paris in the library Mitterrand. And then modern art, like colonial artists, and then modern art and contemporary artists, young artists live, working yet, who lent the work for the show. But of course, the first thing is that as you said, maybe it's the first question is, am I indigenous? Or why me, first of all? And this is something that is very, very important to mention, that for that participation of mine in the project was like understanding that I am not indigenous. Why? Because if I say I'm indigenous, it's self-colonizing, it's me colonizing myself. Because in no original language of the people we call indigenous, the word indigenous exists. That's something the linguist Yasnaya Aguilar Gil, who's Ayuk from Oaxaca, the state of Oaxaca in Mexico, she says, we cannot call ourselves indigenous only because of political reasons and in groups. All the nations that didn't become states, we are indigenous. But she says, me, I'm not indigenous, so I'm not as well. So that would be the first thing, and then maybe you can check online if you want the website of the Indigenous Histories, and you will see what I did.
Thank you. I've got like 2-3 more questions before opening up, and they're all very different. Mm-hmm. So the next one is, you talked about 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, very beautifully about the kind of community of artists that you've looked at from the past, who are transparently referenced in your works. You mentioned Yoko Ono or Oitosika, others.
Carolee Schneemann.
Carolee Schneemann, many. But then there's the kind of community of your contemporaries. And it's a very beautiful moment in London because in the next week, people will have the chance to see your show, but also a show of Oscar Murillo, of Nairi Bagramian, of Haegu Yang, Yan Vo. These are all artists who you know personally, who you've done shows with, who you share galleries with. And what importance is that community of artists, many of whom are also dealing with objects, many of whom are from the global south as well? You know, what's that importance to your way of being an artist?
Very important question, thank you. I have to contextualize again, but when I started as an artist, like more consciously, as I said, because of course I was making drawings and doodles since I was a child, as everybody did, but then people stopped. I didn't. And I started publishing my drawings and caricatures and comic strips in papers and magazines. Through that, I met my friend Damian Ortega, who I mentioned earlier, who was also a cartoon artist, a caricaturist. And then we started making questions about like what are we doing, etc. And through caricature, we discovered beautiful artists like Goya or Daumier, just to mention a couple of them. And of course, we started looking at the German expressionists during Second World War and First World War as well, like Gross or I don't know. Now the names are not here, but these guys that were producing caricatures during a very hard time, politically again, right? And then through that, we went to see, of course, Hannah Hoch and the Dadaists and Kurt Schwitters and Marcel Duchamp and all the et ceteras again that you can remember now. So our language changed a lot, and we started doing ridiculous things that nobody perceived as art, at least in Mexico then, back in the 80s. In mid-80s, late 80s. And then we started making exhibitions with that, but there was no gallery, no institution, no museum paying attention to us. So we started doing our things on our own, opening independent spaces and organizing ourselves that way, in an organic, specific way, following our needs. So we thought and we understood, and we still, I understand that my most important material is need. That's what I have. I have a lot of specific necessities and scarcity. That's the other material that I have a lot. And then this organization, of course, it brings friendship and friction, of course, many times, and many other circumstances that are human and animal, again, but we are friends. And we constructed a big, beautiful, I would say, tissue, social tissue, a community, if you want. It's a very hard term for me to use, but we had a little community there in Mexico of artists. We started doing that, this and that. There was many things that we wanted to read, for instance, that were not translated to Spanish. So not speaking English, we started translating them, assuming we understood, and publishing them. My friend Damián Ortega, again, he has a beautiful publishing house called Alias that is specialized in that. So we appropriated, as the way I appropriate material, we appropriate also those texts and references from theory, from history, understanding or misunderstanding what is art. And that's maybe why we do what we do, because we don't understand. But we still do. And then in the time, it became something else that someone said, like there was in this group, I mean, I would say, we started meeting every Friday in Gabriel Orozco's house in the south of Mexico City, because I didn't know Gabriel, but Damián knew Gabriel. And Gabriel knew also Gabriel Curi. And Damián knew Jerónimo López, whose professional name is Dr. Lacra, who became a famous tattoo artist. So the five of us, started meeting every Friday at Gabriel Orozco's. Gabriel Orozco was nobody then. No, none of us, I mean, not to make a distinction. But anyways, we started constructing a big friendship in sharing material, like, let's say, talking about Picabia and listening to John Cage, if you can listen something from John Cage, right? And then, or sharing beer and all this organic process of belonging and becoming. After some years, the brother of Gabriel Curi, Jose, thought on the idea, these guys have no gallery, I will open a gallery. Then they started a gallery that is called Curimansuto, along with his wife, Monica. And through that, because we, of course, in the early 90s, we started showing abroad, not in Mexico. Damián Ortega just had his only individual show this year, in Mexico. After some more than 30 years of working professionally, nobody's shown his work in Mexico ever. And this is important to mention again because it's political as well. Now, when they opened the gallery, it happened that we had a kind of a network of friends abroad because of showing in the US or in Europe or in Asia. And then for the gallery, it was important to connect with people from abroad like He Yang, Jan Vo, Oscar Murillo, Alora and Calzadilla, Rirkritira Vanilla, and this community again of persons that are part of the gallery in the same organic way. There is business, of course, it's a store. A commercial gallery is a store. But of course, ours is a community. I'm not saying this in an arrogant way. It's the facts.
Thank you. Maybe that is an answer to the last question I'll ask, which is to do with hope. 10 years ago, we did this project at Tate Modern in the Turbine Hall called Empty Lots. And for those of you who don't remember it, it was platforms. On the triangular platforms, on the platforms were triangular planters. And the planters were filled with earth. And the earth was gathered from many different places throughout London, including the garden in my daughter's nursery school and Buckingham Palace. And everywhere in between, Hyde Park, we went the Heath, all sorts of private and public spaces. And nothing was placed in these containers other than the earth. And the idea was that over a course of 6 months to see what would grow. Either that was in there already or that people had thrown into these containers from the bridge of the Turbine Hall, like seed bombing. And when you talked about, I mean, there were many different references in this work. You were thinking partly about the way in which there were canals in what became Mexico City prior to European settlement or invasion there, and the way in which peoples used to grow crops in plantations between the canals and so on and so forth. But in allotments. But the main thing that you said, the main word that you used to describe this work, or what was at the heart of it, was hope. And you said, yeah, I mean, this work, when you began it, and that it looked like this, what you wanted to think about is hope that things would grow. And you've been talking a lot about politics throughout your answers, and we're at a moment of despair in a way. Maybe there's an enormous war. Well, we are in the middle of an enormous war, but maybe there'll be much worse things to come. What still gives you hope in really precarious times?
Well, I sometimes think that maybe the moment we are living now, but this is the history of humankind, right? There is always a bad moment, a hard moment, and there are waves in which we feel better or it feels like nothing is happening. But for sure there is something horrible happening somewhere on earth, always. And sometimes it's more notorious. You know, I don't want to be, curiously, I don't want to be pessimist, but I cannot be optimist. What I can have only is hope, which is different. It's not religious. Sorry. There is this, maybe you heard about it or maybe you tried, but there is this little mushroom in Oaxaca, in Mexico, that it contains a little substance that goes hallucinogenic in human bodies. It's psilocybin. And they call the fungi different ways. San Pedrito, Pajarito, Derrumbe, they have many names, all of them beautiful. But it happens that this little thing grows only in shit. Only. Serious. And I think that I am that mushroom. We artists help society and humankind to look at reality in different, more crystalline ways. Colorful, evocative, transformative, powerful, healing ways. I am that little one. But I only happen to grow in shit. This is shit. We are living in shit. I will not say exactly the details. You know what I'm trying to say. This is very sad. We live in a very, very, very decomposing society and reality. But it's productive. We are making art, right? Literature, film, symphonies, poetry, food. We artists are powerful. We can heal. If we don't believe that, everything is over. And I think society should invest in science and technology to heal, to produce knowledge, to produce new questions, better formulated at least. Same for art. If society doesn't invest in art, we are lost. Culture, education, mostly education about human rights, please. We need more. We should invest in hope. I think of myself as making research, not producing commodities only, right? But we do. But for keep this research on and forever, like the sheep, we need support. And it comes mostly from institutions and curators, private curators. And that's very important for me. And Catherine is a big champion of art. And I'm really grateful and thank you with all of you. Thank you very much.